Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our live webinar from Connected Data, Make Your NAS Work Like Dropbox, File Sync and Share for Enterprise NAS Systems. My name is Samina Sibidar, and I'm the Channel Marketing Manager at Connected Data. And our presenter today will be Tony Hampel. He's our Senior Director of Product Marketing. The agenda for today is first the overview of Connected Data and Transporter, why users adopt Box and Dropbox. Tony will then go into the IT infrastructure limitations, how Transporter connects to the NAS. He'll go over Active Directory integration, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions during the webinar, go ahead and type them up on your sidebar, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. And of course, at the end, we'll have our Visa gift card drawing for 5 lucky attendees, so stay tuned. All right, great. I'm going to hand it off to Tony.
Thank you, Samina. And thank you everybody for joining this webinar. I'd like to take a moment and talk about who Connected Data is. The company was founded in 2011 by the same executive team led by Jeff Barrell, who actually founded a couple of other companies before this one, Blue Arc, which was acquired by Hitachi Data Systems a few years ago, and Drobo. All three companies are storage companies. Now, the product of Connected Data is a product called Transporter. And Transporter is a proven technology. It has about 40,000 active users today, 24 or over 24 petabytes of storage currently deployed. And the Transporter products are sold through a two-tier distribution channel globally. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with Transporter, let me take a moment and explain what it is. First of all, it's a private file sync and share appliance. It competes with the public cloud providers like Box and Dropbox, but as a private cloud solution, basically IT has full control over the data location and the redundancy of the product. It works just like Dropbox, but it eliminates the privacy concerns of public cloud solutions. Now, because it's an appliance that you own and you deploy, it means you don't have the same OpEx or subscription problems that are usual with a public cloud storage company. Now, how Transporter works. Many of you might be familiar with Skype, where Skype basically uses existing wide area network in order for people to place calls. And the people themselves, or the users of Skype, own their own devices. Well, Transporter is very similar in that respect. Basically you own Transporter, you use a wide area network or the internet if you prefer, and basically Transporter creates a peer-to-peer network. Therefore, it's very cost efficient and very easy to deploy. Now, I mentioned earlier that the user interface is very similar to Dropbox. In fact, at Transporter, we developed a very similar UI that works on Windows or Mac, iPads, iPhones, or Android devices. And as you can see on this image, this just happens to be a Mac and you're looking at a Finder display. Now, let's take a moment and look at how users have changed the way they access and manage files. Basically, in the old days, people used to have a NAS device and they used a VPN in order to get access, a secure access to the file folders within that NAS device. Now, IT really attempts to control the data, but let's face it, using a VPN is difficult. It requires a stable internet connection. And today, many users really want to have access to their files anywhere they are in the world on their own personal devices, because we live in a very mobile workforce environment today. Users can't easily access these files, and so they're going rogue. They're actually, without IT's approval, they are creating their own personal accounts on public cloud services and moving their data into those accounts so that they can access them from home, from the office, or on a business trip. So basically today, businesses need a modern, cost-effective way of upgrading the NAS to provide the mobile access that users so dearly want. Now, if we look at a little bit of research performed by the Enterprise Strategy Group, a well-respected industry analyst team, they actually went out and surveyed a couple of hundred people who work in business, and they said, well, look, would you be interested in deploying a public cloud solution but on-premise? The answer was a resounding yes. In fact, 70% of businesses were extremely interested in running cloud storage services from their own data center. Essentially, what they were saying was they want a cloud storage solution, just like NetApp, that they own and control, but with easy mobile access, just like the public cloud providers, people like Box and Dropbox. Now, some of the reasons why they want an on-premise solution is because they then have flexibility and control over where the data is stored. In fact, over half of them said that was the most important aspect. Now, the ability to leverage existing on-premise infrastructure was also a big deal. After all, they've invested heavily in NAS systems and they want to leverage that investment. They also believe strongly that they can provide the security and protection to the data better than any third-party service can. There's concern over whether or not data or files held in a public cloud are really private. Although it's said that they're encrypted at rest, the fact is the public cloud provider holds the encryption key, and as such, they can de-encrypt the data anytime they want to and take a look at the information. In fact, if a government or a regulatory authority wants access to that data, the third party can hand your files over along with the encryption key to that host, to the person requesting. Now, in addition to that, it used to be that people wanted OpEx solutions, but because the subscription model has become expensive, after all, the more users sign up for a public cloud service and the more storage that's used, the more expense there is. It's a bit like your cable bill. You pay monthly and you pay more than you would like to. And so a lot of organizations feel that a CapEx solution is a lot better. And Transporter provides an appliance that you buy and own, and therefore you avoid all the monthly subscription fees associated with a public cloud provider. So let's talk a little bit about Transporter and its network storage connector. Now, the connector provides secure mobile access to data kept behind the firewall in a plug-and-play way. It also eliminates the VPN. And I have some slides coming up that will illustrate how this happens. But primarily, though, it also protects investments in the NAS primary storage that companies have purchased. It extends their useful life because it's adding new features. It syncs storage appliances, and the way it does that is it does that by an exposed CIF share path. So it establishes a path between Transporter and the NAS system using the exposed CIF shares. That way, folders can be migrated from the NAS machine up to Transporter storage, and then using the Dropbox-like UI that I just showed you, mobile users can have the same experience that using a Transporter as they would on a public cloud storage solution. So this really augments the NAS appliance with all the Transporter benefits. It's an on-premise deployment, Dropbox-like UI, and because it's a CapEx model, which you buy and own, the total cost of ownership is very compelling. In fact, the break-even with Transporter versus a public cloud provider is approximately 1 year. Now, I mentioned we have some pictures. So on this one, what you see here is the transporter, and the NAS connector really works for the transporter 75 or transporter 150. So it's deployed on these two models. Located behind a company's firewall, it connects directly with the NAS storage appliance. And it can be any of the NAS storage appliances supported by the icons at the lower half of this slide. The only requirement is the CIF shares are exposed. Now, because Transporter then gives you the mobility through the pathing to the mobile devices that users have on the network. How it works? Well, first of all, there's a security aspect to this. So Transporter holds the user accounts, and when you have a user account on Transporter, you can authenticate the user, assign file access privileges and credentials, and then those are synced with the network storage appliance. Now, if you have a Active Directory service, we have a connector to import a user's login information, file access privileges, and so on automatically. Now, in order to establish a path between the transporter and the NAS storage device, that's performed by an administrator. The administrator pulls up an administration screen, which is here on the slide, and they select the new storage connector folder button. That's step 2A on this slide. And when they click that, then a dialog box pops up. What's in the dialog box? Well, first of all, you enter the folder name. If you have more than one transporter on your network, then you would select the transporter. Otherwise, you would select the default transporter. You would enter the credentials and the path name to the folder on the NAS device. Using this method, you can then create the path via the CIF shares from transporter to a folder on a NAS device. And in fact, it's taken me longer to describe how to do it than an administrator would actually take to do it. It's a very quick process. Now, Transporter does scale to multiple locations. Many people who purchase Transporter, they actually purchase two of them. One to replicate the other, and when they're stored in different locations, you have a disaster recovery solution. Now, the transporters are always kept in sync, so that should something happen in one location, that failure will be completely transparent to the users because the other transporter will just continue running, giving you access to your file data. Now, sometimes people say, well, can I have more than one NAS system in my domain? Can I share files to my mobile users from multiple NAS systems? And the answer to that is yes. So from one transporter, you can connect a path to multiple NAS systems. That doesn't synchronize the NAS systems, but what it does do is it allows mobile users to access files and within folders located on different NAS systems on their personal devices. And that's what this diagram is promoting here. So it eliminates the need for any cloud-based storage, VPNs, or subscription-based file sync and share services, because a company or an organization will have it all in one place. Now, turns out that most people who have NAS systems also use Active Directory, and they use Active Directory server to authenticate their users. And with Transporter, we can actually, through integration with Active Directory, we can provision and deprovision users on an Active Directory database at the same time So what I'm trying to say here is that when a user is added into Active Directory, because of the Transporter Active Directory integration, that user will also be seen on Transporter. That eliminates the need for the user or an administrator to create an account. When that particular user leaves a company, for example, Active Directory is deprovisioned, and so Transporter will stop syncing with that user's devices. The fact that everything that's going on Active Directory is accessible through Transporter really saves the administrator a lot of time and eliminates a lot of problems. Also, people are talking about single sign-on, and so by implementing this process, we can actually also integrate with an identity provider like Okta, who handles an Active Directory service integration behind the firewall. And I have an image on that coming up now. So on this image, basically, to illustrate what I've just described, you have Transporter 75 or Transporter 150 talking to a NAS storage appliance. And then also behind the firewall is an Active Directory server, an Active Directory domain controller, and that talks through an identity provider, just like Okta, to the security or the management interface that we have with Transporter. That way now all the devices on the right-hand side are the users have the appropriate access privileges to the files and the folders that they're supposed to have. Now, when a user leaves an organization and they are deprovisioned by Active Directory, what then happens is the Transporter will stop syncing with that user, and the files held within the container on the user's device, let's just say it's an iPhone, for example, they will be remote wiped. We don't remote wipe the whole device because, after all, you may have personal information on there that you want to keep. But nevertheless, the company files will be removed and the account will be deleted. We've been talking about the Transporter 75, Transporter 150 as having the storage connector capability, but we also have Transporter 15 and Transporter 30, which add to the product portfolio, but they don't have the NAS connectivity. However, the numbering system here means then that we support a number of organizational users with each transporter. So an organizational user is somebody inside of an organization, including the administrator, who has read-write privileges. So for example, Transporter 15 would support up to 15 organizational users, Transporter 30 would be up to 30 users, and so on up through the product line. All the products actually have an unlimited number or support an unlimited number of guest users. And as you can see, the larger the transporter, the more disk capacity we make available to you. So just to quickly sum up what we've been discussing today, the transporter storage connector really does breathe new life into an existing NAS system. It gives a whole lot of new functionality, but it really doesn't disrupt any of the existing applications built around that NAS system or any of the processes an IT organization may have put in place. Because the IT organization has control over the location of the appliance, that also means they control the security, they can ensure appropriate backups take place on the data, and these are all things which aren't usual or can't be validated with a public cloud service. It does deliver the Dropbox experience that users demand, and as I've demonstrated in this discussion, it provides mobile access to users without the need of a VPN. So let me take a pause there and see if we've got any questions.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Tony. So we have some questions popping up here. Let's see. So we have a question on availability. When will the storage connector be available?
So the general availability for the storage connector is scheduled for mid-July.
Okay. We have another question. What NAS systems will be supported at GA, and how will I know if mine is supported?
That's a great question. So we support ONTAP, which means most of the NetApp filers will be supported. We also support Windows Server 2012, so any storage systems running that should be supported. But if you're unsure about whether or not your NAS device is supported, we will be providing a self-test download tool off of our website, and you would run that, and that will look and see if the CIFS shares are exposed, and if they are, your device will be supported.
All right, great. We have a question on versioning, Tony. For example, if two users edit the same file and save it at the same time, what happens?
Well, it's very unlikely that the two files will be saved at exactly the same millisecond. So often there is one that comes before the other. So the file which gets saved first will have one version number, and then the file which is saved second will have a second version number or a later version number. And so the users can go back through our versioning to either of the files to see whatever changes they've made.
All right, great. We have a question on cost. How much will the storage connector cost?
So on the Transporter 75, the cost is $10,000. And on the Transporter 150 round numbers, the cost is $19,000. And these are manufacturer list prices.
All right, great. And there's no cost for the storage connector capability.
No, actually, I should have mentioned that earlier. The storage connector is a no-charge feature that will be provided on the Transporter 75, Transporter 150. And for people who have already purchased these systems, there will be a firmware download, also at no cost, so you can get these features for an already installed transporter.
All right, great. Another question over here. I have several NAS systems in-house currently. Can the storage connector be used to sync these systems?
So as I mentioned earlier, Transporter doesn't sync NAS system to NAS system, but what you can do is create a path from one transporter to different NAS systems and make the files within the folder shared between the appropriate users and their devices. So you can share files from multiple NAS systems, but you can't sync multiple NAS systems together.
All right. Why is the NAS connection limited to the Transporter 75 and 150 and it's not available on the 15 and 30 models?
Yeah, that's also a good question. And the primary reason for this is that NAS systems tend to be large. And as such, the folders on a NAS system can also be large. And the way Transporter works is it uploads the files and the folder when a path is established to Transporter. And so, there's a limited amount of disk storage. Now, one assumes that the files uploaded are hotter and the ones which are not being shared are colder on the NAS system. So there has to be a certain amount of disk storage available, and the larger transporter products accommodate this larger capacity.
Okay. Question about guest users. Can they upload files to a folder selected by a company user?
They can, actually. So a guest user can upload files into a shared folder, but once uploaded, they don't have any write privileges.
All right. Take a couple more questions here. Let's see. About the container on remote devices, can the user take files out of the container and save them in another location?
Yeah, they can actually, but this is not unlike a lot of devices where if you can always copy something off, and once it's copied off, it's no longer under transporter's control. So That's always something to watch out for on any system, and Transporter follows an industry norm in that sense.
All right. We'll take one more question here. In an Active Directory environment, can the NAS files and permissions sync with the Transporter 75, or do the files need to be copied to the transporter?
So I think I touched on this earlier. From a NAS system, the files within a folder are uploaded or copied, if you prefer, into the folder on the transporter, and from transporter they are then made available to the organizational users. And as we mentioned earlier during the Active Directory portion of this discussion, because of the integration with Active Directory, as people are added or subtracted from an Active Directory server, Transporter will provision or deprovision those users at the same time as Active Directory does that. So the answer is, yeah, things are uploaded onto Transporter, and then they are synced with the NAS system when there are changes made to those files.
All right, great. So this is about the time we have for our winners. So our $20 gift card giveaway. So our winners today are Joshua Batchelor, Greg Eulery, Jose Jimenez, Benjamin Lidner, and Kevin Hunt. So if you guys heard your name, please go ahead and email us at sales@connecteddata.com, and we'll get that card out to you. And of course, if you didn't have your questions answered, go ahead and email us at the email that's listed here at sales@connecteddata.com. And we hope that this webinar was informative to you. Thank you again, Tony.
Thank you.
All right, thank you again.